everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Accelerate Your Microsoft 365 Adoption. We're so glad that you've chosen to spend this next hour with us and hope that you'll enjoy the presentation. For the benefit of those not currently working with Kite Tech, or maybe joining us today for the first time, here's some information about Kite Technology. We are a managed IT service provider and consulting firm serving small and mid-sized businesses across the U.S. We specialize in serving independent insurance agencies, nonprofits, and other professional organizations, but we work with many different businesses across a variety of industries. We strive to help our clients leverage technology so that they can operate more effectively, be more secure, and improve their overall business performance. I've highlighted some of the services we provide here on this slide, and if you'd like to learn more about how we can help you with your technology needs, please feel free to reach out to us on our website or during the webinar chat. I'll also drop Adam's Calendly link in the chat, so if you'd like to go ahead and schedule some time with him directly, you can do that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this presentation over to Adam. Adam, before you get started, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Great, thanks so much, Eleni. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today for our presentation on Microsoft 365 adoption. So I've been here at Kite Tech for working on 10 years, and my focus now is squarely focused in our technical consulting efforts in helping folks get accelerated in their adoption and use of Microsoft 365 products. So in addition to that, I previously ran several leadership and management roles inside of our service organization here in our business. It's a pleasure to be with you here today, and I appreciate your time in advance. So let's get started. Here's a brief look at our agenda, and you can see here that we're going to go over the adoption framework. We're also going to cover some engagement best practices. In addition to that, we're going to talk about developing a training program. We're also going to share a little bit about a tool we use, and we have a special guest here from Brainstorm, Jared Lord, and I'll be bringing him in a little bit later in the presentation. Then we're also going to talk about some potential next steps and then open up the mic for questions. So we know that any change is going to come with resistance, is probably the word I like to use. It doesn't happen organically or automatically all the time. And employees typically are resistant to using new technology that's rolled out. In addition to that, we know that bosses or CEOs or owners, managers, leaders, they're very important to the process. And folks that are engaged and supporting the process help and are key success factors there as well. In addition to that, we know that setting targets or goals and tracking said goals is supremely important in the process of understanding where you're at in the spectrum and how you're moving forward. Lastly, and certainly not least, we know that learning from each other and learning by doing in a collaborative fashion, especially since COVID and the remote workforce has just expanded tremendously, is probably the best way to learn and grow in your use of technology. In addition to that, we know that there are hurdles. We know that when you add new technology, that sometimes it adds a training or a competency burden that creates frustration and pain for folks. We also know that the resistance to change is a normal part of the human experience. Also, we know that using new technology is way more than just a technical migration. It's more than just moving your files from A to B. We know that employees continue to use solutions that are not deployed by IT. So we know that the risk and reward in folks going rogue and folks using their own applications, their own ways of doing business helps fragment success and really limits and streamlines innovation and collaboration. Over 80% of folks admit that they're using their own communication tool of choice rather than company branded or company deemed stuff. Technical readiness and user readiness come hand in hand. You have to learn to get an understanding of where your folks are at on the spectrum and where your technology stands. There's no point in buying new tires for a car you don't have. And maybe that's a silly analogy, but sometimes people will buy software that their systems can't even support. Or maybe they'll launch initiatives that their employees aren't trained or ready and prepared to adopt. Lastly, the adoption approach can accelerate or impede the results. Like I said, sometimes folks will jump right in without any training, and we'll notice it'll have a significant impact on slowing change down. In addition to that, we notice sometimes when the plan and the approach to the plan is organized and well thought out, that we see an acceleration and an adoption rate that drives success and drives business value further. Our successful customers navigate adoption in a simple four-step process. They define a vision, which most companies, when they clearly have a defined vision and knew what technology to use, they're most successful. They have leadership support. They have projects that are stamped for approval and really were thought out and planned with the support of senior leadership to encourage that technology use. Those also customers came planned and ready with training for end users. We know that training and reinforcement of key objectives is actually a strong driver to folks' adoption and use inside the different spectrum of new technology. We also know that raising awareness through top performers and champions, product experts, and advocates help increase utilization, help give opportunities for ways to spread that communication, like, for instance, maybe email or employee portals, posters, maybe even little promo videos or newsletters. An adoption framework really helps you drive through the process and optimize results. Here's a high-level three-step simple process: envision, onboard, and drive results. The envision stage of the process is really about identifying scenarios and prioritizing scenarios within the opportunity for you as a business to grow and be most successful. Sometimes folks just want to go and take use of a technology, but they haven't thought about how they can define their roadmap or really drive value. This stage is really critical for getting folks ready. It includes assembling your team, understanding the key players and key champions in that team, defining a business strategy, and determining readiness. Onboarding is about bringing on key stakeholders to build and launch your adoption plan. Get things ready, do some testing, approach some of your early adopters, and learn how to make changes before scaling it out. Lastly, drive results is really talking about taking it to the full-scale adoption. Full-scale adoption comes with a couple of things. One, the actual commitment to using the technology. Two, it comes with understanding users' engagement and their adoption in the change. And then lastly, you want to be able to measure and report usage on what they're doing. So that way you can see, really, is it adoption really widespread, or are folks really just saying, lip service and saying they're using the product? And then always you want to encourage folks to keep moving. Just a word about technical and organizational readiness. Factors of success are often defined by understanding where your gaps are before the plan starts. So understanding what technology you need, as well as where your employee base is through pre-assessments and checklists, can really help you understand where to start. Let's talk about adoption success factors. So really, there are 4 parts that we think about as we drive through the adoption process. One is stakeholders. The next is scenarios, engagement, and then lastly, training. Let's dive into who are the stakeholders. So stakeholders in your adoption effort often find new ways of working and buy-in support across the business. We've identified 4 key groups who help bridge the technology into your business and drive change each and every day. Those 4 folks are bucketed into the categories of executive sponsors, successful owners, or success owners rather, early adopters, and champions. Let's talk a little bit about the executive sponsor. So the executive sponsor really are the folks who help identify key employees that can be supporting sponsors or champions of the products and help move forward. They think about the things that are often referred to as the 5 W's: what, why, when, where, and how. I always get stumbled up by how because it has the W at the end, not the beginning. But anyways, so the executive sponsors help determine those things. They define what the organization's benefit are, and they also understand what call to action looks like for supporting the sponsors. They also help identify and make sure resources are available to support the transition. Also, you have your folks that are the employees that are a part of the sponsorship. And the executive sponsor is always going to have a line to the employees. He's going to communicate the same kinds of things, what their call to action is, talk about their support in transition process, and then also talk about the benefit and the 5 W's. It's really important that the executive sponsors understand how to promote the adoption and the success of it. 87% of successful transformation projects had visible engagement by executive sponsors. So that means we want executive sponsors to participate in the change. Let's talk about success owners. What are they and what role do they have? So they help ensure that business goals are realized by helping people use and get value from the Microsoft services. Success owners should help understand and engage the right stakeholders. They're going to translate the organization's set business goals into Microsoft 365 scenarios. They're going to create an adoption plan and drive usage and realize the value of the services as we move into them. And they're also going to ensure communication and training are successfully implemented. Then there's the early adopters. The early adopters really are the folks who help you drive in and understand what direction you need to travel. So these folks are from different aspects or different business departments throughout your organization. They preferably work across those lines of departments to help understand how to bridge gaps of communication and work habits together. They're likely champions or leaders who will become advocates during the broad launch of the entire organization. In addition to that, they're IT and help desk members, of course, that are going to use the product and support the users during launch. It's important that we include the CEOs and upper management in helping promote the products, but it's also important that we keep them out of this stage in the early adopters. While it can be tempting to ask for their help, we don't want them to slow things down or have a poor exposure to the process while we're working the kinks out. It's also really important to get a good gauge on folks that are on each end of the spectrum as far as the early adopters go. You don't just want a bunch of technically competent folks, you want folks on the other end of the spectrum too, folks that are uncomfortable with technology or folks that help really might identify where some of your key support areas might be as you roll through change. Let's talk about champions. How does a champion come in and help? Well, a champion's going to help provide information and keep that information updated to your team. They're going to let folks know when change is happening and what's going on. In addition to that, they're going to help support the change and the users as they go through the process of that change. They're also going to help answer basic questions that demonstrate features and find new ways to help grow inside the products. They're going to also help the team see the value of the products. Oftentimes, we identify product champions like a SharePoint expert or maybe some sort of person who really wants to drive Teams adoption. We'll help highlight those folks as champions of different products, and they'll help promote them themselves just through use of the product. Let's talk scenarios. So it's important to identify specific scenarios and what are important. Why are they important? They help the team understand how Microsoft 365 can help them achieve more. They act as inputs or validation of Microsoft 365 awareness messaging. Really, that's going to help folks understand what we're trying to communicate. In addition to that, support awareness and readiness activities by putting products in context. People will know when and how to use them. What's the scenario? Scenarios really cover the ways people use 365 to address your business challenges or to achieve some defined goals. This is a simple way that you can help create a scenario for your folks, or maybe one of your departments. Think of as someone in product management, let's say, I want to track a feature across a team and have all resources, updates in one place. I want to use Microsoft 365 to use and create a list that talks about the upcoming features, progress, status, owners, notes, and announcements. And I'll know it's successful when the whole team and related teams are aware of the roadmap and things are launched. This is a framework for how you can create your own scenarios by asking these 4 questions. In addition to that, it's helpful to identify decision criteria around what scenarios are. Does it help solve a real problem? Is it obtainable? Will it be widely used? How much ROI does it provide? Those are just a couple things to consider. Lastly, and certainly not least, inside of the scenarios, it's important to understand how you can measure the use of said scenarios inside of things like Microsoft 365 analytics. There's lots of different ways to drive feature reports and use inside each of the products, and it's really important as you go and test scenarios out, you make sure folks are using them. Let's talk about engagement. Engagement plan really has a couple of key components. In the pre-launch, it's important that we provide a campaign that highlights what's going on and increases the awareness of the change we're about to provide. Also, if we can generate some excitement around what we're doing and how we're using products, that's great. We can also get staff buy-in by outlining what's in it for them. Sometimes folks do things like pre-launch parties, and those will help build engagement and identify product champions. In addition to that, after pre-launch, during launch, it's important to get communication and guides out to users so folks can be enthralled in using products as fast as possible. In addition to that, covering common tasks of things that are frequently used inside the products are great things to do as well. It's also important to do little buzz campaigns, scenarios that also talk about how to use a product. Let's say maybe something specific to a calendar or booking time with someone, or maybe campaigns to kick off and support adoption in post-launch. Lastly, you could do things that are very specific after launch that are focused on tips and tricks that will help drive usage and utilization inside the products. Define new ways to use the resources and also outline start, stop, and ways to monitor behaviors of use of products. Let's talk about planned communication. So it's important to kind of have some steps when you create communication for the engagement of your folks. You want to make sure you've defined the objectives clearly. You also want to make sure that you've defined the audience for communication, including thinking about kind of those end user personas and also project stakeholders. So maybe you want to think about, well, who's my audience here? You think about in your key messages, make sure you answer the 5 W's. Then you want to identify the senders that can be influenced by the key audiences that you're trying to speak to. Outline how the sponsors and owners of the products and champions can help amplify or boost key messaging. And then you outline the channels in which you want to send this stuff out to. Let's talk about the plan, launch, and buzz campaigns in a little bit more detail. So when you think about some of that launch criteria, you want a keynote that's going to kick off the initial things, like maybe the boss, one of the big bosses, talking about what's going on right along launch time. You also want to run through online engagement, maybe using Teams or another product that you use for internal communication to help increase awareness and cover some of the core competencies of ways you can leverage Teams or OneDrive or Microsoft Lists. Also, you want to do email roundups with flyers, frequently asked questions, lookbook. Microsoft has such a large gamut of already pre-canned material that's ready for you to use. And then lastly, you want to really kind of consider how to launch your event. Consider the goals for using 365. How can you launch an event to support these objectives? You want to consider your company culture, the time and the resources. Can you maybe kind of mix and match different activities that would help you leverage, maybe a common meeting or something that's more social? You could also consider existing company events. Is there an upcoming event where you can just kind of tag on and incorporate the launch, or maybe reinforcement of that launch in post? Encouraging ongoing engagement, EOE, and that's a lot of E's. Increasing Microsoft 365 adoption over time with ongoing awareness and training activity. So here are a couple of things that you might consider. You could create a Yammer group or maybe a Teams group that you could start to talk about best practices and new features. In addition to that, you could share success stories of how folks are using products across maybe a company intranet site on SharePoint. You could periodically launch additional engagement events like town hall meetings or lunch and learns to drive end user engagement and really help set ways that folks can exchange ways that they're using the products as well. In addition to that, you can also set challenges and competitions. Internal competition is always something that helps drive success and adoption further. Training. Let's talk about your training strategy. So before building your training plan, it's important to understand the groups who will require training, what you have to cover, and how folks really learn. Training really has a couple of components. It has both pre-launch, launch, and post-launch criteria. So how do we do that? Well, we can plan for that stuff ahead of time using scenarios, audience, or goals. Maybe we think about, well, hey, who is our audience here and what's relevant? Well, is somebody in accounting really going to care about how to use Microsoft Teams? Maybe not, but maybe they're going to care about how to use Microsoft Excel. Yeah, that's a thought and a consideration. You also really want to leverage updating materials and deliverables that you can hand to people physically. In addition to that, we can take the train the trainer approach to create help desks or instructors and champions that are already baked in to help advocate for the product. And then lastly, we can have the ongoing opportunity to deliver that training, whether it's online, self-paced, or instructor-led. That same concept of training delivery comes across all the phases because, of course, training is an ever-going cycle that you'll continue to have to do. Let's talk about the components of an effective training program. When you go to put together a training program, you want to think about, hey, what are the current tools we're using? And how can we spend an increased effort in the training stage of that product to help increase engagement? In addition to that, not just engagement that's important, we'll also learn other ways that we can change behaviors and create efficiencies along the way. Technology literacy of the staff is another way that you can talk about a training program. This is really going to help understand where your folks are at and where they might need to be. The current change programs are important to understand what you're doing in the business so you don't overwhelm, confuse, or maybe be duplicative in what you're providing. Lastly, and certainly not least, is training preferences of your staff. It's important to really understand how folks learn, how folks are engaged, and how folks communicate and participate inside these different tools. Up next is a friend and a colleague, Jared Lord, who I'm going to go ahead and let drive and take over here and he's going to go ahead and describe a little bit about a product we share and use that is called Quick Help. Jared, come on.
Thanks, Adam. Guys, I do these webinars on a regular basis, and I don't think I've seen someone provide such good content, and it was very thorough from the very beginning to the end stages of what you need to do to create change or adoption with your organization. I thought you did a fantastic job there, Adam, and it's a big task. You can tell based on some of the pieces, and maybe you don't do them all at once. But I'll tell you something right now, with the understanding that Kite Technology has, you've got to feel comfortable in knowing that they're going to help you and support you in the use of the licensing and the products that you're purchasing from them. I really enjoyed that, Adam. I enjoyed the presentation. And I want to tell maybe some of you that are like, okay, there's a lot here. And I think with Kite Technology and their knowledge of how to create this framework and follow it, what I'm going to show you now is a platform that executes on it. We have resources. You heard them talk about executive sponsorships. We have emails pre-written and ready to go for your executives to review and send. The campaigns, we've got a champions program to help you build champions. Everything that he's addressed, we can kind of help automate and implement. And I think that's why Brainstorm and the Kite Technology works so well. But let me share my screen, guys. If I can share this right, I'm going to start a little different. Let me share real quick. Do you see my screen okay, Adam?
Yep, we got it.
Okay. So guys, I want to come in here. I want to start with a couple of tips and tricks, because when we talk about adoption, why is it important anyway? Well, you might want to be mitigating risk and cut back on some of that. You may want to cut costs. Maybe you've got duplicate applications and you just need to leverage one. Maybe you want to drive productivity. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why adoption is so important. And I think, again, Adam did such a good job of connecting those dots of, in order to be successful here, we want to tie them to some business objectives. And so I really like that. I'll tell you one that we recently did with an organization by the name of FedEx. They were interested in creating a productivity gain for their users so they didn't have to hire as many people to do these certain tasks. Well, and I don't know if this is possible, Adam, but if you guys know how to use your chat in the go-to meeting here, I'd love to see how long you've been using Outlook. Just go ahead and put the number into the chat, 1 year, 9 years, whatever it is. I'll tell you the average that came through for FedEx was 9-point-something years that their 45,000, this group was a 45,000 group of employees had used. After they participated in learning about Outlook, a 13-minute course, they reportedly saved 2 hours a work week per employee. So you can imagine now that all of a sudden, that's a lot of productivity gains. And so I thought, you know what, let's start with the tip or trick, because this is what we're talking about. You guys have been using Outlook. We've got a couple of you in there posting that 20 plus years. I mean, I'd love to see if this is new to any of you. But here I am, I'm getting ready to compose an email. And have you ever had to, you've wrote that brilliant email and you want to share it again? So you go to the sent items, or you run off and you go to, maybe you've got templates in Word somewhere. Outlook has a library that's already ready for you to use that you build. So I've started to create my email here, but if I come up here to Quick Parts, you can see I've actually already got a library built. So when we get together, I'll just put this in here and I've got my email. There it is, ready to go, right? Now, if this is something you just wrote and you want to save it, you highlight it and you come in here and you say save selection, and that'll enter it into my library. So that's a nice little trick. I don't know if you've known that. I don't know if a lot of you know how to enter the chat. I don't think we need to continue to do that, but I would be interested, is that new to you? Is that something that you find helpful? Because those are the type of things we're talking about. Let's talk about calendar. Have you ever had to compose an email like this? Hey, I can meet up on Monday, and then you've got to go to your calendar and look for some open times between 1 and 3. Keep in mind, I'm just typing this off the cuff, but if you've ever composed one of these emails, this is ugly, right? It takes about 5 minutes to compose, make sure you get the right places, and then you post it. Well, here, instead of creating that message, I can just simply come up here to the insert calendar button, and I can say, I would like to go to a specific date, maybe the next 3 days, just show my working hours and insert it. Now I'm a little long-winded, so that took me about 10, 20 seconds to do, but now you see I've got a detailed calendar for the user. And that user, if they're using Outlook, can click on that and it will just overlay it on top of their calendar and they can see the free times and respond to me. So these are the type of things that we're talking about. Outlook I use because it's common. Most of us have spent a lot of time in there. Are these new to you? Do these tips and tricks help save you time? Well, what about Teams? What about security? Do you even think about operating securely in your own environment? So those are some things you want to think about as we talk about adoption. And that comes from a productivity standpoint. But again, you can think about security and how secure your organization is. You may want to cut costs. So there's all sorts of reasons to do this. But just as a brief introduction, I'd like to show you our platform. We call it Quick Help, and you'll see it here on the screen. We're going to engage your users. If you're using Microsoft Teams, we're going to send you an instant message to the user saying, hey, we'd like you to take this course. We can send a communication out via email. You know, Adam talked about having a communication plan written up. We can help automate that campaign so that the emails go out and the instant messages go out as you conduct these campaigns to create the awareness and desire for your users to learn it. So just know that those tools are in the back end running. But if you look at some of these titles, these are the type of things that we can focus on. How many of you ever get confused? Where should I save this file? Right? Do I use OneDrive? Do I use SharePoint? Should I put it in Teams? This is a great course to talk to you about that. We have others that talk about other apps, right? How do we communicate? Should I use Yammer? Should I use SharePoint? Should I use Outlook? Should I use Teams? When is the right time to use these and how do they work together? So anyways, I'm not going to go through each title like that, but just notice that we're going to connect you with the tools that you're using. And if you work with Kite Technology, they're going to be able to tell you, these are the tools and the content that you're going to need to create this kind of adoption in your organization. So just look at these titles. They hit a lot of different topics. We cover everything that's within the Microsoft suite. So if you were thinking about using Booking or Lists, those are fairly new apps to the suite. They're there. We have content and they're ready to go. We're updating it twice a month. So Teams, you've probably noticed 36 changes last month. And our content has those changes. We're addressing them and they're inside. So it's very fresh and your users will find the screens very familiar. Okay. So stay productive working remotely. This has been a big one over the last few months, right? Learn how to collaborate with SharePoint, use OneDrive. I'm not going to keep going through these, but the topics, we've got hundreds of them and we have thousands of content pieces that we can intertwine and create the right mix for the adoption framework that Kite Technology puts together for you. And then we just deliver it or push it out. So I wanted to take just a minute though and explain what this looks like to the user. Because you may be asking yourself, well, why don't we just go to YouTube? Or you know what, Microsoft even has some free learning, why don't we go there? 86% of your organization is what we call the unmotivated learner. That doesn't mean that they're not great workers. In fact, that's why they're unmotivated to learn. They've got a job to do and they're laser focused on it, right? So as they do that, we've got to create an awareness and desire. We've got to attack the 86%. There's the 14%, the early adopters, the innovators. Those guys are going to go out and do some research on their own and learn how to use the tools. In fact, they'd love this platform. But it's the 86% that we're worried about. Because if they don't learn and if they're not collaborating properly with their teammates, then it's never really going to flow the way it should. So we've got to go out and tackle that. Now, when you first log into this, we actually know if your user is on a PC or a Mac. And so the content will be relevant. We ask them some questions. Maybe they're remote, or they probably are remote. Maybe they're in the office. That's a better way to say it these days. Maybe they manage processes or people. What apps have they heard of and which ones don't they know how to use? Our system will start to gather data as it works with your users, and then it can make recommendations. One of our customers nationwide, they called us the Netflix of learning. So that kind of gives you the idea of what this platform can do. It's going to start to learn what your users need and make those recommendations. But there's a second way and a more effective way of doing this in terms of change and adoption, and that is the framework that Adam laid out. And so these assignments that you're seeing here can be made based on what the organization wants to have happen. You can do this by department, you can push it across the whole organization. So I will dive in here and go into Microsoft Teams. Let's say the organization wants that to be the focus. Now, remember, we're different than just going online and watching videos, and I want to kind of show that to you today. Here we've got a course that's 12 minutes. You don't get a lot of time with these unmotivated users to train them. You know, the days of the lunch and learns have kind of died, and even when you do host them, the attendance is very low. But the lunch and learn figured two things out. You have to find time that they're free. Not that we all get lunches these days, but that's the idea. And you have to create a desire for them to come, free food. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. But our platform is reaching out to the users in a way that perks their desire to watch. That's the executive sponsorship email, right? Send that out. It's like, oh, this is important to the company. We send instant messages through Teams. So they'll like, oh, and they get a 30-second clip on why they should use Teams. So this 12 minutes, they're not going to consume it all in one setting, more than likely. But we've broke it down into little pieces. Here you'll see a 30-second video. Then we've got a poll. Then we have another 1 minute, 57 seconds. I want to take you through this really quickly. You're not going to see any of the video because it's encrypted. But the idea is there's a gal here, and she's simply explaining to you why you would even look at Teams. She does it in 36 seconds, and now you know what's in it for you. Not why the company's going to use it, but why would you use it? How's it going to help you? You'll notice we have documents here. Some of these are use case scenarios. Sometimes they're printout cards that you can set on your desk to show you what functions you want to remember to use. Some of them are Excel spreadsheets. If this was an Excel spreadsheet training, it would have a document there that you could open and work inside so you don't ruin your own data while you practice and learn. So just know that you'll find those going through. As I continue, let's ask them a few questions. We're engaging the user here. We're not simply just having them sit here and stare at a screen. We want them to think. How comfortable are you within Teams, right? What other applications are you using? Adam talked about this, getting the right data. You may find out that your organization is using more apps than you care to admit or want to know about. We'll find that for you though, so you can be more secure. It's a collaboration killer when people are using more than one app. So let's find those things out. Anyways, that doesn't take very long. Again, you can tell I'm talking through it, but it's very short. A couple of questions for them to answer. Now we've got some how do you do this? Now we're going to start pointing and clicking, and the teacher in this video is going to ask them to follow along, or for example, give them a challenge to send an instant message to a user, or make a phone call, or set up a meeting, whatever they need, whatever you want that change to be. But you'll see the button over here on the right-hand side. That's going to launch Teams. So they're very engaged with the content. It's not them staring at a screen for 13 minutes. It's, hey, we got a couple questions. It's, hey, click here and do that. It's very engaging with the user, and they'll walk away with a lot bigger understanding of the product. Now, we also do live sessions, so they can come in here and register. Brainstorm puts them on. It's a very safe environment. Your user will feel like they're the only one there. There'll be thousands, but we've got moderators answering questions and things of that nature. So they'll register, we'll do all the hard work, send out the reminder invites. If they miss it, we'll give them a chance to re-register, or we'll show them where they can find it on demand and watch it at their leisure. So I'm not going to go through this again, but just know it's important for you to know that the topics are going to be relevant to your business objectives. The content that's delivered is going to be very engaging, and your user's not going to stare at a screen as much as they're going to be utilizing it. As Microsoft continues to update their apps, as Microsoft adds new apps, we will have that content here and ready and fresh for you again. We're updating it regularly. So I'm going to go back to the deck now, but that's what Quick Help looks like. One of the important parts that Adam brought up here, we're tracking change here. So as we begin, you'll notice that this is a 500 user client, and that blue bar is showing you how much has been adopted. When we first met this client, they were at 200,000, which was significantly lower than where they were. That dollar amount is what's called net present value. That's the value of productivity you're getting out of the Microsoft suite. So we want to track this, right? Let's take a baseline. Where are you at now? Microsoft's going to tell you you're at about 13%. So figure you're about there. And then we're going to increase that. That gold line is 80%. And that's our goal when we first meet you. So that's where we want to head. So these reports are super important for us to go through and show you the data of what's happening. Adam, go to the next slide for me. Again, same idea. I'll tell you something that we just did at Brainstorm. Since COVID-19, we've all been having more meetings. We have a simple question, we don't know the answer to it, so I invite 3 or 4 colleagues, we get on what's called a 30-minute meeting, and we take that 30 minutes to answer one question. And Brainstorm's noticed this is a problem. So we're learning how to have shorter meetings or less meetings altogether. And they've done that by training us on how to use group chats. So now I get the right people in a group, ask that same question, I get the answer quicker, I spend less time in meetings, and we're a lot more effective. So do you see those 2 middle charts there? Meetings attended, Brainstorm wants to see that go down. Chat messages sent, Brainstorm wants to see that go up. So that's the idea behind these reports is, are we making, are we changing the way people are working because of these efforts? Here's a security assessment. We won't go through the details, but we'll be able to find the gaps, and we have courses that match that based on where your gaps are. Next slide, Adam. And this goes back to that survey that I showed you in the middle of the class. Remember this, select all applications you use to communicate. Here you go. They probably didn't know marketing's paying for WebEx. Somebody's using Intercall. There's a Zoom. There's a pocket of Zoom users in here. GoToMeeting, and they're paying for 3 of them. So what if we canceled those subscriptions and got everybody using Teams? Or maybe you want it to be Zoom or WebEx. It doesn't matter. Let's educate the people on what the business wants to do so that we can collaborate more effectively and cut those costs. This data is super important. And that's, you know, when you think about training, we don't necessarily care how many people show up. It's, does it affect the change? And so we're very focused on that. And with the framework that Kite Technology is driven, I mean, you're going to be able to pull that off. Here's some quick numbers for you. I love the one on the right-hand corner. 55% of Quick Help users can safely manage tasks. They know the secure ways to operate. Right below that, 84% of users say Quick Help content applies directly to their everyday work. Remember, we want to tell them why they want to use it, not because you guys or the executives tell us to, right? How does it help me? I won't go through the rest of that data, but it's pretty powerful to see the effects of what Quick Help can do for you when you flip it on and let it get to work. So Adam, I'll turn the time back over to you. I know we're running short here, so I'll conclude my time there. But thanks for having us out. You did a phenomenal job with that framework, and we look forward to working with you guys in adopting the software that they provide for you.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're just going to close out here with a couple of quick slides here. One is kind of the overview of what the adoption process is. We made some promises of things we would deliver in this webinar. We hope that we have. And I just wanted to kind of recap what the process was. First step is to get your team together. You're going to figure out who's going to be participating, who's going to be drivers of use and adoption inside your tools. That's assemble the team. Then you're going to define the strategies and scenarios. Strategies, not only do they come along with plans that are in alignment with key business objectives, but you also want key success metrics. So definitely need plans that are qualitative or quantitative. I don't know which of those words because I'm not that smart, but things you can measure is the bottom line. You also want to understand the readiness, right? You want to know where your people are at, and you want to know where your technology stack is. If you don't have an understanding of those gaps on the front end, you're going to fail at the next step of building the plan. When you go to build that plan, you want to make sure you understand where you're going, what those goals are, and talk about rolling out that first phase, the early adopter pilot and the champions, and then make changes in the scope as needed. And then boom, lastly, onboard the employees. As you go through different iterations of this change process, you'll go through that process, and it's a bit cyclical, as in it repeats. How can we help? These are different ways that Kite Technology can come alongside you guys. We can help with technical things like migrations or of emails or files. We can also help you with full adoption of the products, whether it's Teams or OneDrive or SharePoint, any of them really. We can help you get more familiar with and leveraging Azure Active Directory and Endpoint Manager. We can help with end-to-end Microsoft 365 security. And then lastly, we can help with data governance and compliance. We did have one thing that we wanted to share here as a special offer for folks here today. For anybody who is a current client, if you're interested in the product Brainstorm's Quick Help that Jared gave you a quick peek at, we can start up a 45-day trial. You just want to reach out to your account manager, client experience manager, and we can help get that going. And then lastly, for our new clients or new prospective clients, for the first 5 appointments made following this webinar, we'll give the opportunity for a assessment, Microsoft 365 assessment at 50% off the regular price. That's a savings of $600. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open the floor for questions. We are down the wire here on time, but I want to encourage folks to turn your cameras on, turn your mics on, go ahead and share and speak, and we're ready to talk when if you guys have questions.
All right. Well, Adam and Jared, thank you guys so much. You shared a lot of information, and as expected, we did have a few questions that came through the chat. Okay, I think this first one I'm going to let you take, Adam, and it's what is the average amount of time that it takes to adopt Microsoft 365? So what can they expect?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. So it really varies, honestly. It depends on a couple of things. One, where you're at in your existing journey of 365. So we find a lot of folks are already using things like email or Teams. Potentially, really, how much you've started to use those products. That's a key metric as to how long it takes. In addition to that, it also really comes down to how deep you want to get. You want to jump in shallow, or you want to jump into the deep end. So we've seen, I'm just actually in the middle of an engagement with a company down in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're working through the migration process. We did email within a week-and-a-half period of time, 2 weeks really to kind of flush out the tail end of the migration. And now we're in the middle of Teams, and that Teams project is going to be a multi-stage project, probably take us a month or a month and a half or so. So it just really varies based on the size of the organization and the goals.
All right, thanks, Adam. I'll let you take this one as well. What resources can I start with today to get started?
Oh yeah, sure. That's a great question. So basically, Microsoft has just a gamut of resources on their homepage where you can dive in and kind of see what's going on. If you go to support.microsoft.com is the landing page, support.microsoft.com, and from there there is a lot of getting started resources with Microsoft 365 that you can just get right out of the gate. So that's the place I would start in terms of the free training that's available.
Okay, thank you. Jared, this one's for you. Who is the best person in a business to manage Quick Help if we decide to go with that? And does it take up a lot of their time?
It's really going to depend on the size of the organization. But if there's an HR department, normally it sits there and it settles there. If it's a little smaller, you've got an IT guy. I say that, that you got one guy in there, right? Or even sometimes Kite Technology will be the one. There's not a significant amount of time to administer to it. Once you know the training that's needed, you assign it and it does all of its work. So you spend an hour putting all that in, and it just automates itself for the next 90 days. So there's not a lot of work involved there. We didn't talk a lot about this, but it ties into Office Graph. So people come and go from your organization, they're automatically put in. It's single sign-on. So there's a lot of automation to it, to where you're not going to need to do a lot other than that first hour of setup. And Kite Technology is right there with you the whole time. So, you know, for your small organizations, I'd say that. If HR wants to get involved, they're doing a whole bunch of other things, and there's probably a little more time involved, but they do a little bit bigger projects as well.
All right, thanks, Jared. This one, maybe for Adam, but maybe for you as well, Jared. How long do you recommend that we need to focus on engagement strategies after we've started to use a certain product? Is there, I guess, a certain timeline that they can expect?
I feel like that's the same as the first one a little bit, Adam. From my perspective, guys, it never ends.
Yeah,
you know,
it's an ongoing process.
Changing it so quickly that once you've got it ready, they're going to have updates and changes anyways. Maybe you leverage those, maybe you don't. So, but if you're migrating, you're creating a SharePoint site, you need 30 to 60 days to get it in front of them, and then you've got to reinforce it for another 30. So I say a good timeline is 60 when you're thinking, hey, let's launch SharePoint and get people using it. Does it end there though? Probably not. Not from my perspective.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. I would agree with that comment. I think it's typically a longer process than most folks think on the front end, and it comes down to how much you want to get out of it, right? Right. But you should think of that process as something that is a change cycle, and it continues.
Okay. I like this one. We have some employees who are really resistant to changes in technology. Do you have any strategies for handling those few that just won't budge and want to keep doing things the old way?
Well, my mom had this thing that she used to get out. It was a wooden racquetball paddle, and that was a strategy she used on me. That might work.
I'm not sure that'll work. I don't think that will work today. HR might have a little issue with that.
I think really when it comes right down to it, it's about coming alongside the users where they're at in the process, right? You have to really understand your audience to know how to serve them. And so really it starts small. It starts with simple conversations with folks on all that each end of the spectrum, like I talked about earlier today, and taking the time to get to know your audience and who you're supporting. So I would say you help there. No matter what, change is inevitable, and change is going to come, and you just have to decide: are you going to be pushed along with it, or are you going to be a participant and an advocate and take that opportunity to grow and leverage that change too?
Those 4 points that you had on that slide, Adam, the executive sponsor, the champions, those 4 I'm talking about. I think you guys will see that when you follow the strategies that Kite Technology's laid out, the whole company's going to make that change minus a couple, and they'll realize that to be valuable there, they're going to have to end up doing it. So, Adam, in jest, Adam brings up the paddle, right? But it's almost like that happens because as these champions are sharing why everyone's using it, we're gathering data that people are like, wow, I love using this because I saved this amount of time for myself, not the company. When those harder people realize their friends and colleagues are using it to succeed for themselves, it kind of puts the squeeze on change, because if they're going to keep up and stay competitive with their colleagues, they're going to have to do the same. So that's not how we want it to go, but there will be some that are that way. Remember, we've got to attack the 86% that don't typically learn anyways, and it's designed to do that. And those strategies that Adam laid out, those are fantastic, and I think you'll see that those will work with even the hardest people that are resistant to change. Slower, but it'll work.
All right. Okay, Jared, if someone would like to sign on for Quick Help, what is the commitment? Do they have to do a whole year?
Adam, I'll go ahead and let you address that one.
Yeah, for sure. So we do definitely require that folks do sign up for a commitment. of 1 year, and we also ask that they also license everyone in their organization. We don't allow the product to be purchased by itself as a standalone without time that comes along with it as well. And that time is really for two reasons. One, it's to help get you started on the right foot. And then two, to make sure we do a monthly check-in to make sure that folks can stay engaged in the product and really understand its usage, right? And how much folks are doing.
All right, I think we're pretty much at the end of our time. So thank you guys. Thank you to Adam and Jared for a great presentation and for everyone that took the time to watch today. We hope that you found the information that the guys shared beneficial as you're getting started or continuing on your Microsoft 365 adoption journey. If you would like to learn more about our services, Adam, if you could put our last slide up there, that would be great. It'll provide you with some opportunities or some ways that you can reach out to us. You can email us at consult@kitetechgroup.com. You can give us a call, or you can visit our website and complete a contact form there. Also, I did put Adam's Calendly link in the chat, so you can also use that as well and schedule some time with him directly. As we mentioned earlier, by the end of the week, we will be sending out a follow-up email, and it will include today's recording as well as the information on our offer. And just a reminder to please take a minute to complete our survey. Thank you again to everybody for spending time with us, and we do hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care now.
Thanks, everyone.